Welcome, my friend. Tonight, we will take a slow and quiet journey into a world that feels almost forgotten. A world that once thrived, then faded into silence. This is the story of the Hittites, a hidden empire of the ancient Near East. As you listen, allow yourself to relax, breathe softly, and let the gentle rhythm of history carry you into sleep. There will be no rush, no noise, no harsh edges. Only soft images, calm words, and the steady flow of a story that unfolds like a quiet dream. Perhaps you can imagine yourself lying beneath the stars of Anatolia, where the Hittites once lived, feeling the cool night air, and hearing the distant whisper of the wind across ancient stones. This is not just history, it is a peaceful walk through time. So, let us begin. The land before the empire. Long before the name Hittite was spoken, the lands of Anatolia were alive with quiet villages. People tended fields of wheat and barley, cared for goats and sheep, and built small homes of mud brick and timber. Life was steady, ordinary, and filled with the rhythms of the seasons. The Hittites would rise from this land. From these valleys and hills, their world was one of stone walls, of river crossings, of fields stretching beneath the sun. It was not yet an empire, just scattered communities, learning, trading, and growing. Imagine the sound of soft wind moving through tall grass, the smell of earth after a light rain, the glow of a small fire as families gathered in the evening. This is where the story of the Hittites begins. Not in battles or kings, but in the simple heartbeat of daily life. As time passed, small villages grew into towns. Stone replaced timber, and walls began to rise. Roads formed, connecting one settlement to another. People traded grain, textiles, and tools. Small shrines stood in corners of the towns, where offerings were made to gods of earth, sky, and storm. The Hittites, though not yet united, were learning to live in larger communities. Life was still quiet, but the roots of something greater were beginning to grow. Picture a marketplace. Not loud or chaotic, but gentle and steady. Merchants with baskets of figs and olives. Children running across dusty paths. A potter shaping clay at his wheel. A soft hum of voices fills the air, but nothing is hurried. This was the pace of their world. Eventually, one city began to stand taller than the rest. This was Hattusa, a city of strong walls, wide gates, and sacred temples. From here, the Hittite kings would build their empire. But Hattusa was not only a place of rulers and armies, it was a living city. Streets were filled with people carrying baskets of bread. Priests walked slowly toward temples, holding incense. Farmers led donkeys through the gates, bringing wheat from the countryside. Children chased each other across the courtyards. The empire would be remembered for its kings and battles. But in truth, it was built on these daily rhythms of ordinary people. The smell of bread, the sound of footsteps on stone, the flicker of oil lamps at night, the great walls of Hattusa. The city of Hattusa was unlike the smaller villages that surrounded it. Its walls stretched for miles, winding across rocky cliffs and valleys. Built from massive stone blocks, they stood as both protection and a quiet symbol of strength. But for those who lived within them, the walls were more than defense. They were part of daily life. Children played in the shadow of the gates. Farmers walked along the paths near the towers, balancing baskets of fruit. Traders paused to rest by the walls before entering the busy heart of the city. The gates of Hattusa were carved with images of lions, guardians of the city. Imagine walking through such a gate. The stone cooled beneath your hand, the carvings smooth from centuries of touch. Passing through, you would hear the soft echo of footsteps, the murmur of voices, and perhaps the faint ringing of a bell carried on the wind. Though the empire would one day fall, the walls still stand, silent and enduring, holding the memory of lives once lived within their embrace. Inside Hattusa, life followed a steady rhythm. The mornings began with the call of animals. Roosters crowed, goats bleated, and donkeys brayed as farmers prepared for the day. The scent of baking bread drifted from clay ovens. Women carried jars of water from fountains, their footsteps soft on the stone streets. In the marketplace, stalls displayed woven fabrics, bronze tools, and baskets of dried figs. The air was filled with the gentle hum of voices. Not loud or chaotic, but steady and calm. Merchants called softly to passers-by. Children lingered near the baker's stalls, and priests moved slowly among the people, collecting offerings for the temples. By evening, lamps flickered to life. The soft glow of oil flames lit doorways, and smoke rose from hearths as families gathered to share warm meals. Some nights, music could be heard, the gentle strumming of lyres, the quiet beat of drums. It was not grand or dramatic, but simple and soothing, like the heartbeat of the city itself. At the center of Hattusa stood the temples, tall, simple structures of stone and wood, where people came to honor the gods. The Hittites worshipped many deities, gods of the sky, of storms, of the sun, and of the earth beneath their feet. The temples were not loud places of worship, but quiet sanctuaries. Incense drifted through the air, carrying a soft fragrance of herbs and resins. Priests in long robes moved slowly through the halls, lighting lamps and placing small offerings of bread, wine, and honey. For the people, these temples were places of comfort. When rains failed, they came to pray. When harvests were plentiful, they came to give thanks. Children watched wide-eyed as rituals unfolded, the flickering lamplight dancing across carved stone walls. Imagine the soft sound of chanting, steady and low, blending with the faint crackle of fire. The temple was not just a building. It was a bridge between the people and the world they could not see, a place of peace in the heart of the empire. From Hattusa, roads stretched outward like veins, connecting the empire. These roads were not grand stone highways, but humble dirt paths, worn smooth by countless footsteps, carts, and hooves. Along them, travelers moved steadily. Merchants with wagons of goods, messengers carrying clay tablets, soldiers on patrol, and farmers bringing surplus harvests to nearby towns. The roads were alive with movement, yet never rushed. Imagine walking such a road at sunset. The sky painted with shades of orange and purple, the soft crunch of gravel beneath sandals, the distant sound of a bell carried from a herd of goats, travelers pausing to share bread by the roadside, the smoke of small campfires rising into the cool evening air. The empire was vast, but its rhythm was carried along these quiet paths, where each step connected one life to another. The palaces of the kings. In Hattusa, near the heart of the city, stood the palaces of the kings. They were not glittering with gold or polished marble like later empires, but strong, practical, and enduring, built of heavy stone and timber beams. Their walls enclosed large courtyards where daily life unfolded. Inside, scribes worked carefully with clay tablets, pressing wedge-shaped marks into soft surfaces that would later be dried in the sun. Courtiers moved quietly through the halls, carrying messages, scrolls, or food for the royal household. Guards stood near the gates, not restless or harsh, but steady, like shadows of the walls themselves. The palace was not just a seat of power. It was a place of order, a space where meals were prepared, where families of the court gathered, where decisions were made that reached far beyond the city. Yet, within the noise of empire, there was always a hum of daily life, the soft scrape of stylus on clay, the quiet laughter of children, the warmth of fires that burned through the night. The Hittites left behind thousands of clay tablets. These tablets, pressed with cuneiform signs, held treaties, prayers, laws, and stories. They were the memory of the empire, captured in lines of careful marks. In quiet rooms, scribes sat at low tables, clay before them, stylus in hand. The work was steady, rhythmic. A press here, a wedge there. Tablet by tablet, the history of a people was shaped. Outside, the world moved quickly, markets bustled, soldiers marched, harvests rose and fell, but in the scribe's room, time slowed to the pace of writing. You might imagine the sound, the soft scratch of a stylus against wet clay, the occasional murmur of a reader, the faint creak of a wooden stool. The tablets themselves were small, simple, yet they carried the voices of kings, the whispers of prayers, the records of lives now long gone. Beyond the walls of Hattusa, the lifeblood of the empire was found in the fields. Farmers rose with the sun, tending to wheat and barley, herding goats and cattle, and guiding plows pulled by oxen. Their lives were shaped by the turning of the seasons. In spring, fields were green with shoots of grain. In summer, golden waves rolled in the wind. Autumn brought harvest baskets filled with grain. Grapes pressed for wine, olives gathered for oil. Winter was quieter. Fires burned longer, and meals were simple, made from stored grains and dried fruits. Imagine standing in one of these fields at dawn. The air cool and still. The first light spreading across the hills. Farmers moving slowly, steadily, with tools in hand. The sound of birds rising from the grass. The empire depended on their quiet labor. And though their names are forgotten, their rhythm fed the world around them. Inside homes and palaces alike, life gathered around the hearth. Meals were prepared not with great fires, but with steady flames, where pots simmered slowly. Bread was baked in clay ovens, flat and warm, the scent filling the rooms. Meals were simple, stews of lentils, onions, and barley. Bread dipped in oil, honey for sweetness, and wine for celebration. In palaces, the meals were larger, with meat from cattle or sheep, flavored with herbs. Yet, whether rich or poor, the rhythm of cooking was the same: the crackle of fire, the stirring of pots, the sharing of food. Picture a family gathered near the glow of a hearth. The fire flickering, casting soft light across mud brick walls. A pot bubbling gently. Children listening to quiet stories told by their elders. Outside, the night air is cool, but within the home, warmth spreads not only from the fire, but from the presence of those who share it. As evening settles across the Hittite lands, imagine the flicker of oil lamps glowing inside simple stone houses. Their homes were not lavish palaces, but strong and sturdy dwellings, meant to protect families from the seasons. The floors were packed earth, cool underfoot, and the walls were often lined with clay plaster, softening the edges of stone. Children might play quietly in a corner, while their mothers prepared the evening meal over a small clay hearth. The meal itself would be humble, but nourishing. Grains formed the basis of most Hittite diets: barley, wheat, and emmer. These were ground slowly, by hand, on heavy stone quernes. The sound of grinding was rhythmic, almost meditative. If you listen closely in your imagination, you might hear the soft rasp of stone against stone. As flour was patiently made, bread was baked daily, sometimes as flat rounds, sometimes in thicker loaves. With the bread, there might be lentils, beans, or onions, simmered gently in clay pots. Occasionally, meat was added, mutton or goat, though this was saved for special times. The air in such a home would be fragrant with smoke, herbs, and simmering food. Outside, a donkey might bray, or the faint jingle of a goat's bell might be heard as the herd returned for the night. It was a simple life, grounded in rhythm, repetition, and the steady flow of days. The Hittites, those skilled warriors and empire builders, were also farmers, bakers, potters, and herders. Their hidden empire was not only carved from stone walls and treaties, but from the quiet work of countless hands shaping daily life. These details, the bread baked in clay ovens, the walls spun by careful fingers, the fields plowed by oxen, are what truly sustained the strength of their kingdom. As the quiet evening deepened across Anatolia, the people of the Hittite world found comfort in familiar routines. Villagers often gathered near small courtyards, where stories were told in low voices and the last tasks of the day were finished. Someone might weave on a loom, the steady motion of shuttle and thread marking the rhythm of life. Another person might carve wood, shaping handles for tools or simple figures for play. The hum of conversation, mingled with the occasional bark of a dog or the call of a night bird, would carry through the cooling air. In the distance, one could sometimes hear the faint sound of temple bells. These bells were not sharp or startling, but soft and steady, calling people to remember the gods who watched over their lives. The Hittites believed in many deities, each linked to the land, the sky, the water, and the storms. Chief among them was the storm god, who brought rain to nourish the fields. Temples to these gods rose in their cities, built from stone blocks fitted tightly together. Inside, priests tended fires, offered bread, and poured wine. The rituals were calm, steady, and repeated year after year, forming a rhythm as natural as the changing of the seasons. Even for those far from the cities, The presence of these gods was felt in the land itself. A farmer turning the soil might quietly whisper a prayer for rain. A mother baking bread might press her hands together in thanks for the grain. The empire may have stretched across mountains and plains, but it was bound together not only by treaties and kings, but by shared rituals of quiet devotion. The Hittites were also skilled in craft. Their artisans worked with bronze, shaping weapons, tools, and ornaments. The sound of hammering metal was part of daily life in towns and cities. Yet even in this work, there was a kind of rhythm, a pattern of strikes and pauses, not unlike a song. One could imagine the distant tap of a hammer echoing in the warm night air, blending with the calls of crickets and the rustle of wind through trees. Beyond their villages, the roads of the Hittite Empire stretched outward. Traders traveled slowly along these paths, carrying goods from one region to another. Donkeys bore loads of textiles, jars of oil, or baskets of grain. Sometimes, foreign merchants brought in tin and copper for bronze making, or fine objects from distant lands. Along the way, caravans would rest near wells or rivers, gathering around small fires, sharing stories in many tongues. The empire, though often unseen in the quiet of a single home, was alive in the movement of goods and the exchange of words between travelers. To sit back and imagine these scenes is to feel the hidden pulse of the Hittite world, not the clash of armies, but the slow, steady rhythm of lives lived in balance with the land and sky. Morning in the Hittite lands began slowly. The first light of dawn spread across the hills, brushing the stone houses and farmlands with a pale gold glow. Families stirred awake as the roosters called, and smoke rose gently from hearths where bread was baked on flat stones. The bread, warm and fragrant, was shared with bowls of milk or honey. Farming was the heart of daily life. Fields of barley and wheat rippled in the wind, their colors shifting gently like waves. Farmers worked patiently, guided by the rhythm of the seasons. In spring, they plowed the soil with wooden plows drawn by oxen, their hooves pressing deep into the earth. In summer, the fields glowed under the sun, and careful watch was kept to protect the crops. By autumn, the grain was harvested with curved sickles, bundled into sheaves, and stored in clay bins to last through winter. Children often played nearby while their parents worked. They might chase one another along paths between fields, or help gather herbs and wildflowers. Older children learned useful skills, how to herd sheep, how to fetch water from streams, or how to grind grain on heavy stones. These tasks were steady and repetitive, but they carried with them a comforting sense of belonging. As each child learned to contribute to the household, family life was built around these rhythms. Houses were simple but sturdy, made of mud brick walls that kept cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Inside, woven mats covered the floors, and clay lamps gave a soft glow in the evenings. Families gathered together, sharing meals, telling stories, and passing on traditions. Festivals added color to this routine. At harvest time, families brought offerings of grain, bread, and wine to local temples. Priests and priestesses led prayers to the gods, thanking them for abundance and asking for protection in the seasons ahead. Music filled the gentle flutes, drums, and the soft strum of lyres. People danced slowly, hand in hand, their steps following patterns that had been passed down for generations. These gatherings were not loud or overwhelming, but steady and joyful, a gentle reminder that life was shared. As the day waned, families returned home. The smell of stews and roasted vegetables filled the air. Torches flickered in the streets, and the cool breeze of evening carried the faint sound of distant bells from the temples. Once again, the empire seemed to quiet itself, as though the land and its people exhaled together after the work of the day. To imagine these moments is to feel the heart of the Hittite world, not only an empire of kings and treaties, but of families, fields, and fires that glowed in the night. Inside a Hittite home, life moved at a quiet pace. The walls were built of sun-dried bricks, their earthy tones blending with the landscape around them. The roofs were flat and often used for drying herbs, storing tools, or even sleeping on cool summer nights under the watchful sky. The rooms inside were simple. In one corner, a hearth glowed gently, filling the house with warmth and the soft smell of smoke. Clay jars lined the walls, holding grain, oil, and dried fruit. Mats made from reeds and woven cloth covered the floor, offering comfort as families gathered in circles, by lamplight. Children might listen to gentle stories told by elders, tales of the gods, of kings, or of the land itself. These stories were not only entertainment, but threads binding generations together. Clothing was woven by hand, made of wool and linen. Men often wore tunics, tied at the waist with simple belts, while women wrapped themselves in long dresses, decorated with small beads or embroidery. On special days, both men and women adorned themselves with jewelry made from bronze, gold, or brightly polished stones. The clinking of bracelets, or the soft gleam of a necklace, caught in lamplight, gave a touch of quiet beauty to their daily lives. Food was prepared with care, using the crops and animals raised nearby. Bread was the most common meal, baked flat or round, and shared at nearly every gathering. Stews of lentils, beans, or chickpeas simmered slowly in clay pots, sometimes flavored with garlic or leeks. Sheep and goats provided milk for cheese, which was soft and slightly salty. Honey, gathered from hives in the hills, sweetened both food and drink. On festive days, wine was poured into small cups. Its rich taste savored in the soft glow of the evening. The act of eating together was not hurried. Families sat closely, speaking softly, sharing food from common bowls, and enjoying the company of one another. The crackle of fire, the soft sound of chewing, and the gentle rhythm of voices made meals feel less like a task, and more like a ritual, quiet reminder of belonging. Even the simplest of moments carried a peaceful grace. A mother braiding her child's hair in the morning light, a father teaching his son how to shape clay into a jar, or siblings laughing while chasing each other across the courtyard. These everyday details gave life its meaning in the Hittite world. They were not dramatic scenes of war or kingship, but the soft fabric of life itself, woven thread by thread, day by day. As night returned, clothing was folded neatly. Fires were dimmed, and once again, the empire drifted into silence, resting until morning's first call. When we step out from the humble homes and walk slowly into a Hittite city, the world opens into gentle movement. The streets are narrow, paved in stone or pressed earth, winding between walls of mud brick and timber. The rhythm here is not hurried, but steady. Merchants sit by their stalls, offering baskets of grain, clay vessels, and woven cloth. The sound of quiet bargaining carries through the air, soft voices mingling with the distant bray of donkeys. Shadows of the city walls stretch long across the ground. These walls, built from massive stone foundations, topped with brick, were strong but not threatening, silent guardians of the people within. Gates allowed travelers to pass through, bringing stories, goods, and news from faraway lands. Temples stood at the heart of the city. Their stone courtyards were broad, with altars where offerings of bread, oil, or wine were placed in reverence to the gods. Priests moved with measured steps, wearing robes decorated with symbols of the divine. The air here often carried the scent of burning incense, mixed with the faint smoke of sacrifices offered to honor the heavens. It was not a place of noise or fear, but of quiet devotion, where the people felt close to their gods. Markets were another center of life. Imagine stalls shaded with woven cloth, filled with jars of honey, baskets of figs, and bundles of herbs tied with string. Craftsmen worked nearby, potters, shaping wet clay into smooth bowls, metalworkers, hammering bronze into tools, and weavers stretching threads across looms. The hum of their work created a soft background, steady and rhythmic, like the pulse of the city itself. Children wandered among the crowds, laughing, sometimes carrying small baskets to help their families. Stray dogs padded along the edges, waiting for scraps of food. Every sound blended gently, the chatter of women at the well, the echo of footsteps on stone, the faint music of a flute played by a wandering performer. In the evenings, as the sun lowered, the city quieted again. Shadows grew deeper, lamps flickered in doorways, and smoke curled gently from rooftops. Families walked home slowly, carrying baskets of food, while priests lit the final lamps in the temples. The day ended in calm, and the city seemed to breathe softly, resting under the blanket of night. Through it all, Life in a Hittite city was not harsh or overwhelming, but steady, built on small rituals, shared work, and quiet faith. At the center of many Hittite cities, the temples stood as quiet anchors of daily life. They were not towering structures meant to impress, but broad and sturdy, built from stone and brick. Their courtyards opened to the sky. Wide doorways welcomed the people in, and carved reliefs along the walls showed scenes of gods, animals, and sacred symbols. When you stepped inside, the air shifted. It was cooler, calmer, touched by the faint smell of burning oils. The sound of the city seemed to fall away, replaced by silence, broken only by the soft crackle of a fire, or the low murmur of a prayer. The Hittites believed deeply in the presence of their gods. They worshipped a wide pantheon: storm gods, sun goddesses, river spirits, and household protectors. Each god was honored with offerings suited to them: bread baked with care, a bowl of honey, a jug of wine poured slowly, a gentle prayer spoken aloud. Festivals were moments of gathering. The people moved together into temple courtyards, dressed in their cleanest clothes, their voices quiet but steady. Priests and priestesses led them through rituals, lifting their arms to the sky, pouring wine onto the earth, and lighting incense that sent thin streams of smoke curling into the air. These rituals were not rushed. Every gesture was slow, every sound deliberate, creating an atmosphere that felt timeless. Music often accompanied these moments. Flutes gave soft, flowing notes, while hand drums set a gentle rhythm. Sometimes, singers intoned hymns, their voices rising and falling like waves. The music was not loud, but soothing, designed to guide both worshippers and gods into harmony. In smaller shrines, families prayed alone. A mother might bring her child and whisper a request for health. A farmer might offer grain for a good harvest. These simple acts tied everyday life to the divine, weaving faith into every season. The Hittites also believed their kings carried a sacred duty. The ruler was not only a leader of armies, but a servant of the gods, ensuring that rituals were observed correctly, and the balance of the land remained unbroken. In this way, faith was both personal and communal, stretching from the smallest household to the grandest palace. As night fell on festival days, torches flickered across the courtyards, and the last notes of music faded into the distance. The people returned home slowly, carrying the calm of the temple with them. Lamps were lit, bread was broken, and the quiet of devotion remained, like a soft echo in the heart. Beyond the walls of the cities, the land stretched wide and quiet. Rolling hills, winding rivers, and valleys dotted with farms made up much of the Hittite landscape. To move through this world, the Hittites relied on roads, simple paths at first, pressed into the earth by countless footsteps, then strengthened with stone and clay as the empire grew. Travel was not hurried. A merchant might lead his donkey slowly along a path, baskets of figs and jars of oil tied carefully on either side. A family might walk together toward a nearby village, children skipping beside their parents, carrying small bundles of food. Soldiers, when not at war, often moved along these roads too, their pace steady, their sandals pressing into the dust. The roads connected not only villages and cities, but also people to one another. Markets could not exist without them. A pot made in one town might be sold in another. Grain harvested in the fields was carried to feed distant families. Each step along the road carried more than goods, it carried stories, greetings, and bonds that tied the empire together. Along the way, small inns or resting places gave travelers shelter. These were not grand buildings, but simple wooden or stone houses, where a fire warmed the room and bread could be shared. Travelers sat together, strangers at first, but joined for a night by food, fire, and soft conversation. The sound of crackling wood and the gentle hum of voices filled the air, soothing after a long day's journey. Caravans sometimes stretched longer, donkeys tied together, laden with copper, tin, or textiles. Their bells jingled softly as they walked, echoing across valleys. Merchants guided them patiently, watching the skies and the seasons, for travel was best under fair weather. In winter, snow made the hills difficult. In summer, the sun slowed every step. The roads also carried messages. Envoys from the king traveled between cities, carrying scrolls with seals pressed into clay. These messages linked governors, priests, and generals, ensuring the empire moved as one. The sight of a royal envoy was rare in a small village, but when it happened, people would pause their work and bow respectfully as the messenger passed. At times, travelers stopped by roadside shrines, placing a small offering to ask for safe passage. A stone carved with the image of a god, a jar filled with water, or even a handful of grain might be left there. The belief was simple. Every journey was under the care of the divine, and as the sun set, roads themselves seemed too quiet. Travelers sought shelter, animals rested, and torches flickered only in the nearest city. The land lay in darkness, the paths waiting patiently for the morning's footsteps to return. Festivals in the Hittite world were woven gently into the rhythm of the seasons. They were not rushed occasions, but slow gatherings, moments of gratitude, and times of shared joy. At the end of harvest, when the fields had given their grain and the baskets were full, families and neighbors came together to celebrate. In courtyards and open fields, tables were laid with bread, cheese, figs, and wine. Clay lamps flickered softly as the evening descended, and the smell of roasted meat carried on the breeze. The people gathered in circles, speaking in low, steady voices, laughter bubbling now and then like a quiet stream. Music gave life to these evenings. Flutes made from reeds played long, flowing notes, while hand drums set a slow rhythm. The lyre, with its gentle strings, added a soft and soothing melody. Together, these sounds wove a calm atmosphere, filling the air not with noise, but with harmony. The music was as steady as the heartbeat of the people, a reminder of connection between them. Dance was part of these festivals, too. Men and women joined hands in long lines, moving slowly, their steps simple but graceful. Children followed at the edges, mimicking the movements, their laughter light against the steady rhythm of the drums. No one hurried. The dance was not for display, but for togetherness, a way of sharing joy in calm unity. Storytelling was another treasured part of the gathering. Elders sat at the center, their voices low and deliberate, telling tales of gods, heroes, and the ancient past. Around them, listeners leaned closer, the firelight painting soft shadows across their faces. The younger ones drifted toward sleep as the words unfolded, carried along by the gentle flow of the tale. Even games had their place. Children played with carved wooden toys, small balls of cloth, or simple board games scratched into the ground with stones as markers. Their joy was soft and playful, the kind that faded easily into drowsiness when the night grew late. As the stars appeared overhead, the festival grew quieter. Music slowed, torches burned low, and families wrapped themselves in cloaks against the cool night air. Some stayed near the fire, watching the sparks drift upward, while others walked home slowly, the soft murmur of their voices fading into the darkness. Festivals were more than celebrations. They were threads of memory and belonging, tying each person to the land, the gods, and one another. In their slowness, they left behind not excitement, but peace, a lasting calm that carried into the days that followed. The Hittite palaces were not dazzling like the marble of later empires. Instead, they were strong, steady, and enduring, built from stone and sun-dried brick. Their walls rose firm against the winds of Anatolia. Entering a palace was less like stepping into a place of glittering wealth, and more like walking into the quiet heart of power. The courtyards were broad, paved with flat stones, worn smooth by many footsteps. At their edges, columns stood tall, supporting shaded walkways where officials and scribes moved calmly with clay tablets in hand. The sound of their sandals on the stones echoed softly, never hurried, never loud. Inside, the air was cooler. Thick walls kept out the heat of the day, leaving the rooms dim, touched only by the glow of oil lamps. Their flames flickered gently, casting shadows on carved wooden doors and painted walls. The colors were deep but muted, ochres, reds, and blacks forming patterns of animals, gods, and kings. The king himself was not always surrounded by noise. He was seen as both ruler and servant of the gods, and much of his time was given to rituals and careful listening. In the throne room, he sat not only as a figure of authority, but as a point of balance between the gods above, the people below, and the land itself. His throne was carved wood overlaid with bronze. Not ostentatious but dignified, glowing softly in the lamplight. Nearby, scribes knelt with their styluses, pressing words into clay tablets. They recorded treaties, prayers, lists of grain, and the movements of armies. The scratching sound of reed against clay was faint, but constant, like the whisper of a stream. These tablets, baked and stored, became the quiet memory of the kingdom, kept safe in deep rooms. Guards stood at the palace gates, their spears upright, their armor gleaming faintly in the sun. Yet even their presence was not loud, it was steady, a reminder of protection. They spoke little, their silence part of the atmosphere of calm strength that surrounded the king. At times, foreign envoys came to the palace. They arrived with gifts, jars of oil, fine fabrics, or carved ornament sound. They were welcomed with rituals of peace. Conversations unfolded slowly, carefully, through translators. The words measured and deliberate. Every phrase was chosen with care, for in these halls, words could shape peace as surely as swords could shape war. Beyond politics, the palace was also a place of family. The queen held a role of respect, sharing in rituals and decisions, her presence steady beside the king. Children played in the inner courtyards, their laughter soft, mingling with the calls of doves that nested along the walls. Even within the heart of power, life moved with a quiet rhythm, not rushed but enduring. As evening fell, the palace too grew calm. Lamps glowed in the windows, their light golden against the night sky. Within the thick walls, scribes stored their tablets. Guards shifted in silence, and the king offered prayers. As the night deepens over the Anatolian plateau, the villages and cities of the Hittite world grow still. Fires that once glowed in kitchens and courtyards fade to gentle embers. The wind carries only the softest sounds, the rustle of reeds, the low murmur of cattle, the distant bark of a village dog. In the royal city, lamps flicker faintly in palace halls, their light stretching long across stone floors. Scribes set aside their clay tablets, their styluses resting quietly beside them. Priests, having completed their prayers, step away from temple doors, leaving only the gods and the night to keep watch. The great walls of Hattusa, once alive with footsteps and voices, now stand silent under the moon, guarding secrets that would outlast the centuries. In the countryside, shepherds lie beneath the stars, their flocks gathered close. Farmers rest in their cool mud brick homes, the smell of baked bread still faint in the air. Potters, weavers, and blacksmiths sleep beside their work, knowing that tomorrow, the rhythm of life will begin again, calm, steady, unchanging. The Hittite Empire itself, though mighty in its time, would one day fade. Its palaces would crumble, its temples fall silent, and its roads be covered by dust and grass. Yet, in these quiet moments, as we imagine the gentle lives of its people. The Hittites live again not in conquest or power, but in the simple acts of living, working, and sharing the earth beneath an endless sky. And so, as we close this long and gentle journey, let your mind drift with them into the stillness of ancient villages, the warmth of forgotten hearths, the whisper of wind over stone. There is no need to hold on to the details now. Just let them soften, like fading echoes, carrying you into calm rest. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be as peaceful as the quiet nights of the Hittites. Beneath the stars of a world long past.